Welcome. This is another in our series of interviews with candidates, Libertarian candidates who will be on the ballot in Wake County. Today we have the honor of talking to our candidate for governor, Steven Difiore. Steve will be on the ballot. Hi, Steve. How you doing? Welcome. Steve will be on the ballot in Wake County, and as a matter of fact, most people in Wake County will have the opportunity to vote for 3 or 4 candidates, and in Southern Wake, you'll have the opportunity to vote for 6 Libertarians. Steve has lived in North Carolina since 2004, and like many people, he came here from upstate New York for the job opportunities. He's earned a bachelor's degree in political science from the UNC at Charlotte, and his professional experience includes retail, security, customer service, and information technology. And currently, he's a lighting control specialist, which I'm told involves designing and selling lighting systems for commercial, government, and industrial applications. But he tells me right now his full-time job is running for governor. At UNCC, Steve organized became a certified martial arts instructor. He taught classes part-time to earn money to work himself through college. And he was the co-founder of the Taekwondo Club. He's also a graduate of the Charlotte Civic Leadership Academy, which is a course designed for residents to take the next step in becoming community leaders and improving the quality of life in neighborhoods. An interesting connection between Steve and I is that Steve was born at Royal Air Force Base Upper Heyford in England in 1984 when his father was serving in the Air Force. And I, at the same time, was stationed at another base, Greenham Common, in the south of England. So we have that connection. So with that, we'll start our interview. Steve, welcome. Nice to have you with us.
Welcome. It's good to be here. And boy, isn't it a small world, isn't it?
It's a small world and getting smaller, even though we're stuck at home.
I know, right? Well, through the magic of technology, we can communicate across hundreds of miles.
Right. So let me start with the $64,000 question that every candidate gets. Why are you running for office? Why are you running for governor? What makes you qualified to be the governor of this great state?
Absolutely. So that's a very good question. The people of North Carolina deserve more than what they have as far as choices. They deserve better policies and better opportunities and better options. Currently, the political establishment in North Carolina gives us a choice between do-nothing Democrats and do-nothing Republicans. It's always team red and always team blue. And every single election, we always talk about the same problems. Why are we always talking about the same problems? Because the people in power have no interest in actually fixing those issues. Because if they did, they'd have to find something else to campaign on. I truly believe that the Libertarian Party, that our message gets at the root of these issues. And rather than just hack away at the branches, I want to get right down to the heart of a problem and solve it. Because in my opinion, there is no other state in the Union that is a better place to live, work, seek your prosperity, raise a family than North Carolina. We have an incredible potential. But it's not tapped the way it should be. And it's not tapped mostly because of political considerations by the establishment. The Libertarian Party offers another option. That's why I'm running. We deserve better, and I truly believe in our cause, what we're all about, our policy solutions to these problems that are on the minds of many across the state. And it is our civic duty as citizens to speak up when we see that there's a wrong and to do what we can to make the world better. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing this.
Great. And speaking of policies and making changes to policy, on your website, you list several issues, but let's talk about what you consider to be your top 3. Your first was education. And you say on your issue paper that North Carolina's K-12 public education system wastes money, frustrates teachers, and prevents parents who have limited means, their choices. Can you explain what you mean by that? Elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, if you're a parent and you want to send your kid to a good school, you only have a couple options. Option one is to be able to afford to send your kid to a private school or to homeschool or to use any of the other private options. The second way to get your kid into a good school is to be able to afford a nice house in a nice zip code. There's a common thread here, isn't it? So if you are a working family of limited means that live in, let's say, an area with lower property values, the school you have to send your kid to, if you have no other choice but to choose the public school option, is not going to be up to snuff. Now, no one thinks that people should be denied choices in life, right? And the way our school system is set up, if you just want to send your kid to the next school district over, right? Oh, the school district that I'm closest to, that school is not so great, but can I send my kid to the school right over there? It's just, one more bus stop over. Most people, at least in the city of Charlotte where I live in, think that that's a good idea. We call that school of choice, right? So if you're going to send your kid to a public school, shouldn't you have the ability to choose which public school you send your kid to? And most people would say yes, but the state government says no. Incidentally, if you have the opportunity for another option, so for example, charter schools are very popular, right? If you don't have the ability to, if you get the opportunity to send your kid to a charter school through the use of what's called an opportunity scholarship, that is a great boon for you. I mean, that is an opportunity to give your child the best, I guess, starting spot in their education. But in North Carolina, the state government cannot have an honest conversation about education and the things that we can do to make it better, because it's always partisan this, it's always partisan that. I'll give you an example. Not too long ago, I had a Democrat friend of me explain in words the Opportunity Scholarship Program and the charter school system that we have in North Carolina. And they were saying, wouldn't it be great if Democrats put this system into place? And I was like, oh, well, good news. We have that sort of, right? And so it's called the charter school system and the Opportunity Scholarship. And they immediately go, oh, well, I'm not for vouchers. I'm a Democrat. I'm not a fan of taking money out of public schools, even though they just described the system that we have. There's a sort of ideological gridlock that keeps us from having the honest discussion that we need to be able to make our education system better. And because our politicians can't have that honest discussion, what we need is more opportunities for parents to choose for themselves the option that best fits them. Because who knows better what is right for you and your family than you? Certainly not the folks in Raleigh. And what I want is a system that takes the control out of their hands and puts it back into yours.
That's a very, very good explanation. I think you're probably going to be talking about the gridlock between the tribalism between the Democrats and Republicans on a response to a few of the other questions I'm going to ask. And the next issue that you listed on your website is healthcare, and in that you talk about certificate of need laws as a major example of bad state regulation. Let's talk specifically about the con laws and what they are and what you would do about them.
Yeah, so most people don't exactly know about certificate of need laws or con laws. When you talk about it, when you explain it, the reaction is almost universally the same, regardless of their partisanship. How is that legal? How is that allowed? Why is this going on for so long? So for folks at home who don't know what a con law is, I'll give you an example. Imagine you're a gastroenterologist. You're not affiliated with a hospital or a hospital group. You are a small clinic owner, an independent physician. You have your own small doctor's office. And one of the things that you do is you provide x-rays, ultrasounds, and every now and then you could rent what's called a mobile MRI machine from the local hospital group to have MRI days. And you charge between $250, $500, $700 for the MRI because that's like sort of the cost level for you to rent that out on a per hour basis, right? Okay, cool. Then you think, well, what if I just had an MRI machine? Just had it in my office. I'm already doing MRIs. I'm already qualified to do it. Why don't I just buy an MRI machine, put it in my office, and then I can, just post the prices for MRIs. 250, 500 bucks a pop. Not necessarily cheap, on par with what, like, say, a major car repair is, but certainly better than the 7, 8, 10, $20,000 price tag that usually goes along with an MRI at a hospital, right? So you as a physician go, let me buy one. The state government will say, no, you are not allowed to buy this piece of equipment for your office, for your practice, because you have to get permission from the hospital you're going to compete with. And the hospital will decide whether there's a need for another MRI machine in your area. Let me ask you a question at home, dear viewer. What do you think the hospital is going to say when they're getting $7, $8, $10,000 a pop for MRI, and someone comes along and says, "Yeah, I kind of want to undercut you by a few $1,000s a picture and compete with you"? Do you think you're going to allow that? Almost universally, it doesn't happen. I'll give you another example. What if you're an ophthalmologist? You do eye surgeries. You are certified to perform an eye surgery, a cataract removal, for example, in an area hospital. And you say, well, I know how to do this. I can set up an eye surgery center in my own independent clinic, right? And provide these services at a much cheaper rate for people. But the state government has a law that says you cannot even begin to petition to build an eye surgery center in your independent practice because the hospital has already determined that their eye surgery center is sufficient for the people in that area. So you still have to go to the hospital, pay the hospital's fees, and if you want to have something else, tough luck. The CON laws are essentially government-controlled monopoly protections for healthcare industries, for big hospital groups. They keep independent doctors, small clinics from being able to offer much needed quality healthcare at a price that people can actually afford. And this law, it has bipartisan support. Bipartisan. The Republicans love it because the hospital associations bankroll their campaigns. The Democrats love it because it keeps healthcare costs high so they can talk about Medicare for all. Meanwhile, we the people are stuck with a regime that keeps our costs high and our access to it limited. I think that's un-American and criminal. And both parties are complicit. It's an important issue. It really is. North Carolinians deserve better.
Again, an issue that could be resolved if we take the partisanship out of the discussion. And this last issue we want to talk about here is on your website is the alcohol and beverage control state system, which I like this particular line. You see the ABC system that succeeds at maximizing cost, minimizing convenience, and inhibiting commerce. It's kind of a relic of prohibition, which we all know was a very successful government program. Let's talk about
absolutely.
how you would handle the ABC system.
Yeah, so the ABC system is something that not a lot of people maybe think about all the time, right? It's not something that's in the public mind, but it's really important for a lot of business owners, people who own bars, restaurants, clubs, things like that. Basically, if you live in North Carolina and you want to buy an alcoholic beverage, right, a spirituous liquor, some bourbon, some scotch, whiskey, whatever it is, you only have the opportunity to buy what the government says you can in the ABC store. So the ABC stores are government-controlled stores, government-operated stores, and they're the only place where you can buy these items, and only what the government approves. There's I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, in Mecklenburg County, and just across the border in South Carolina, there's a big place called Frugal McDougal. A lot of people love to go there. Why? Because they have everything, literally everything. Whatever the market wants, whatever people want to buy, plenty of things there. But if you go to one of the ABC stores in Mecklenburg County, you can only buy what the government says you can buy, right? So that's the consumer end. It infantilizes the consumer, saying you don't have the right to choose to purchase what you want. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is with if you're a bar owner or a club owner or a restaurateur. Let's say your local ABC just doesn't like you, right? They subject you to spurious inspections. They harass you. They treat you badly. They don't fulfill your orders, right? So you can put in an order for some sort of beverage, right? A whiskey or something, and they don't necessarily have to hold it for you. They can just say, "No, we sold it to someone else who offered us more money. We'll give you a credit for any other items on our list, but no, you can't have your money back," right? That happens. And when that happens, who can these business owners complain to? The very same people who did that to them. So imagine you're being bullied by someone bigger and stronger than you, and then you have to go and complain to that very same bully. You think you're going to get a good result? You absolutely won't. It's a system ripe for abuse. The positions on the board are doled out to cronies, people who are established or well connected. It's not a meritocracy, and these people, they do not care about business owners or consumers because they don't have to. They don't. It's government operated, so they don't really care about you. They don't have to care about you. That's why this system needs to go, so that we can get a better, more fair system in place, not just for consumers, but for business owners. And I'll tell you, during COVID, for example, restaurants were free to stay open, but bars and clubs are like, no, you can't open. You're not allowed to stay open. And if you dared try to stay open, the ABC would go, well, we don't like what you're doing for political considerations, so we're going to revoke your license. It's being weaponized against people for political considerations, and that's just a wrong system to have in our state.
The three issues that you just mentioned are basically state monopolies controlled by the Republican Democrat duopoly. That's interesting.
Exactly, and their interest is not your interest.
And speaking of COVID-19 and the pandemic, you mentioned bars being closed, but restaurants that serve liquor can be open. The COVID situation has, I'll call it a pandemic because it is, it's a real threat, but it's been the number one issue in many campaigns. It seems to dominate the political discussion, unfortunately, that it become politicized. So talk about two aspects. What have you learned personally from this COVID-19, and probably expand that to what do you think we should have learned from the COVID-19? And I'll give you a chance to not necessarily second guess Governor Cooper, but if you were sitting in the governor's seat, what would you have done differently or the same, or maybe not at all?
Yeah, so the thing is, one thing I've learned about COVID-19 is that when the government puts into place a lockdown or a shutdown or all these strict rules, the only way that you get compliance is if people choose to comply, or if you have the heavy hand of cops coming down on people for just exercising their American rights to be out in public or to try to earn a living. Because remember, in the early days of the pandemic, no one really knew how dangerous this was, right? So everyone was kind of freaked out about it. They were kind of scared. It was new. It was novel. No one knew what was coming. No one knew what the mortality rates were going to be. So I don't really want a Monday morning quarterback on the decisions that were made back in March and April, because we didn't really have any good information, right? But what we did see was that there was uneven application of the law, right? You can go outside unless you can't. You can work from home unless you have to go into work. Wear masks, don't wear masks, depending on which month or which organization you were listening to give you advice, whether it was the FDA or the CDC or the WHO or Fauci or whomever, right? So it all depends on when you got this information. But if you had, for example, an order that said you can go outside, all right, cool. The Ace Speedway, they were saying, hey, let's have our outdoor things. Nope, you can't do that because we don't like you, says the government. Okay. But then you have a bunch of outdoor protests. Protests are fine because that's all right. Okay, fine. Like that's fine. Let's have our protests. So other places were like, well, we'll just call our outdoor event a protest and have social distancing and masks. Nope, you can't have that either. Okay. There's this uneven application of the law. And all throughout this, it's been politicized. The Republicans will use aspects of the government's response or fears and uncertainty over COVID for their own political gains. And the Democrats, they'll do the same darn thing. And meanwhile, everyday people are left going, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to do, right? You can have recommendations, and people should be able to make the choices that they feel they need to make for their own families and their own safety. But we can't do that without good information, right? And there's this sort of like, when you demand masks, when you say you have to have masks, there's a lot of us who go, I don't want to do what the government has told me to do, So guess what? That's going to be the case. Make it a choice and make it fun. Like, I'll give you an example. I'm not in the vulnerable category, but if a private property says, hey, you have to have a mask, I'll wear a mask. And you know what? I got a fun mask, right? If I don't want to show my state patriot pride and want to be a little bit of a nerd, I made a Star Trek red shirt flag mask. Read into that what you want. But the thing is, you can have fun with it, and you can appeal to the better angels of our nature rather than merely give out mandates. The government is really good about giving out mandates, and it's not good at enforcing them evenly. It's really good at enforcing them in ways that are geared toward political advantage. And then it can only really enforce things that people are willing to go along with. Because I can tell you, when those protests first just burst onto the scene after George Floyd was killed, no one cared about the lockdown. No one cared about the mask mandate. There was an issue that was important to them, and they got out in the streets. And there was nothing Raleigh could do about it. Right? Again, we are an ungovernable people unless we want to be governed. I honestly take heart by that. I think that's nice. That's a nice thing about America, that the government can only get away with what we let them get away with. And so going forward, I think we should realize that, and that people in power, people in government, people in positions of leadership, they should, instead of being our father, giving us a stern order, they should be more like our brother and work with us in a collaborative way to achieve a good ends, right? As a leader, I don't want to be your father. I don't want to be your mother. I want to be your brother or your uncle, right? You don't want me to live with you, but I'm there to drive you to the airport if you need. I'm there to lend you a hand, to give you some advice, to tell you if you're doing the wrong thing. But, I'm not the kind of guy to whip out the belt or to throw a chocolate at you.
And at the end of the day, when you do that, you get more people that will do the right thing in their mind.
Absolutely.
Well, in that response, you mentioned the protests against the cases of police brutality. It just boggles my mind, and probably boggles many people's minds, how this cycle keeps repeating. As many times as you see an egregious case of police brutality, it keeps popping back up. And people are talking about things like qualified immunity and the militarization of police. And
Libertarians are talking about that. Republicans and Democrats aren't talking about that.
Well, generally, yeah, the media is talking about these issues and they're making it political. But the point I'm making is that libertarians have been advocating for demilitarizing police, ending no-knock searches, ending victimless crimes for decades, ever since we've been around. And now these issues are becoming coming to the fore and maybe becoming popular. So how would you react to that? How would, as governor, you have the power to do certain things. You have to rely on the legislature to pass the law. But how would you deal with issues like the militarization of police and qualified immunity?
Yeah, so right now, the only political party in power, at least in Washington, D.C., for example, that's doing anything about qualified immunity is the Libertarian Representative Justin Amash. He's the only one that has a bill. And the Democrats won't sign on to it. The Republicans won't sign on to it. They just use anger and frustration over this real terrible problem to get out their base. And then I'm sure after the election, they'll continue to do what they've been doing for the last 4 years and the 4 years before that and the 4 years before that, which is absolutely nothing. Recently, the local, the case with regards to the Breonna Taylor shooting in Kentucky, that verdict was handed out. And these police officers are not going to face charges for murdering Breonna Taylor. And why is that? Because technically, they didn't break the law. Now, here's the thing that most people don't get. When we think something is lawful or unlawful, we think that it's right or wrong. We put some moral weight on it. But that's not the case. The government has made legal many, many things that we would think are wrong, morally wrong and unjustifiable. And the government has made many, many things unlawful that we would say are perfectly fine, right, justifiable, or have no moral weight whatsoever, right? So we get caught up in this whole, it's a crime or it's not a crime. Just because something's illegal doesn't mean it's wrong. And just because something is legal doesn't make it right. And qualified immunity is a situation where there's one legal standard for everyday citizens, and then there's another legal standard for police officers and agents of the state, right? Now, you would think that police officers, agents of the state, they'd be held to a higher legal standard than everyday citizens, right? It's exactly inverted. The cops are held to a much lower legal standard. And here's my appeal to police officers, right? Because we need the help of police officers for organizations like the Fraternal Order of Police or police unions in states that have them to make this change. When you have a lower legal standard, you get more of what you incentivize. It is an incentive to be irresponsible, an incentive to be cavalier. And all that does for you is ensure that it's harder and harder to weed out the bad apples. And it galvanizes the public, sometimes unjustifiably, against you. The expression is, a few bad apples spoils the whole bunch. But people tend to forget that last part. We don't have a system where we can effectively weed out the bad apples. We don't have a system where we can effectively hold our government officials to account. And this is not just with cops. This is with DAs. This is with prosecutors. Heck, even with judges. When they don't do their due diligence, when they violate someone's rights, when they engage in malfeasance, they can say, oh, I'm immune. Even though we can say that what I did was wrong, you can't hold me to account because of qualified immunity or sovereign immunity or absolute immunity. It's just an unjust and wrong system. And as governor, one of the things that you could do, one of the things I would do, you have a bully pulpit as the head of the executive branch in any form of government. You have to raise the public awareness because qualified immunity is a judicial doctrine. It was invented out of whole cloth by the Supreme Court. And it's just gotten worse and worse and worse since the 60s when it was initially formed, or since the 80s when it was given a shot in the arm by the Supreme Court. This is a judicial doctrine. But good news, we elect our judges. What is your stance on qualified immunity should be a litmus test question for every judge in every election. Should be a litmus test question for every elected DA in every election. And then if the judiciary cannot and will not do anything about this, and I honestly have my doubts that they will, the fix has to be in the legislative branch. And so we must hold our legislators to task. Every single state senator, every single assemblyman, everyone in the General Assembly, we have to hold their feet to the fire on this. And who better to do that than the person who occupies the executive branch?
Thank you for that. Well, we've just about run out of time, but I will conclude this interview, as most interviews conclude, with giving you the last word. Is there anything that you'd like to say uh, to get people to vote for you for governor of North Carolina?
Absolutely. So in North Carolina, we've always been given a choice between Team Red and Team Blue, and we've always gotten the same thing. And how many people think that the government that we have is awesome, is something that we could really get behind, it really has our best interests at heart? Not a lot of people, right? You may be, oh, I'm a conservative, or oh, I'm a liberal, and that's perfectly fine. Don't you deserve a state that recognizes your right to be as liberal as you want to be or as conservative as you want to be? Don't we deserve a government that says, I recognize your right to self-autonomy? Don't we deserve a government that will not meddle in the affairs of local governments and counties? We, the people, are the ones who hold the power. Shouldn't we have a system that is geared toward promoting our interests rather than those at the very top? If you're dissatisfied with how the Republicans have been doing things, or how the Democrats have been doing things, or how these politicians seem to only come at you with rhetoric, but never real solid solutions, you have an opportunity to send them a message that they cannot ignore. A vote for the Libertarian candidate is a vote for something. It is a vote for change, for the people, for solutions. And your vote is the thing that politicians covet the most. When you deny them that, when you give that to someone who actually wants to change the government and the policies for your best interests, in spite of the system, then that really does shake things up in a way that benefits you, the voter, your communities, and does not give the power to the people who hold it and lord it over us. I'm asking for your vote in November because I believe that we deserve better, and I want to work for you, the voter, the everyday citizen. And I don't care if you're a conservative or liberal or libertarian or heck, even some granola socialist type. I want you to live the best life you can, and I want a state that enables that. And right now, we don't have the leadership that will really advocate for all North Carolinians. We deserve better, and I hope to earn your vote in November.
Thank you, Steve. We've been speaking with Steven Difiore, who's the Libertarian candidate for governor of North Carolina. You can find out more about Steve and his campaign and his stand on the issues, and send him a question, or maybe even send him a donation or volunteer for his campaign. His website is Steven with a V, for F-O-R, North Carolina, Steven for North Carolina.org.
.com.
Excuse me, Steven for North Carolina.com. It'll be at the end of this video, in case you missed it. Thank you again, Steve.
Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And for all the viewers at home, please feel free to reach out on social media. Follow me, like, share, subscribe. Send me an email. My email address is on my website as well at the very bottom of the page. If you have any questions, if there's a specific issue that is really important to you, please reach out. Both me and my team work really hard to answer every single email that is sent to us, because we believe that you deserve answers as fellow citizens and voters.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much.